Good morning.
Good morning, Sherry Ann.
How are you guys?
Okay.
Just getting things situated for Cantor Levine. Hopefully he'll be on just a second. Larry, I don't know if you're there. I saw your email about the link not working, so I will try to send you a different one. I don't think he's there. How are you doing, Gail?
Okay.
Well, Cantor Levine just got back from Arizona, so he's
I know he drove back.
yesterday.
On the phone during his trip.
Oh, okay.
It's a long ride.
Yeah. So you called to keep him company for a little while?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know my son had driven to Tulsa a couple of weeks ago, and it's a 10-hour drive. And at one point, you get to where there's just like nothing. So he called because his eyes were getting a little heavy. So just wanted to.
Across Texas?
Huh?
Have you ever driven across Texas?
Yes, I have.
It's amazing the way the terrain changes. It's West Texas is totally different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a long ride.
Yeah, a long ride with nothing to look at.
Long and boring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Did he get back safely?
Yeah, he made it back last night.
I can't believe he's teaching this today. It's amazing. How are you doing, Sherry Ann?
Doing okay. Doing okay. Huh?
You going batty?
I was getting ready to say I'm pretty much done with this whole situation. I just, I'm done.
Yeah, but the situation's not done. I am.
No,
too.
it isn't. I am though. I am. So that may leave me kind of in a quandary.
So what does that mean that you're done?
She can't stand it anymore.
Yeah,
just gonna go back to the way things were.
Yes, immediately, if not sooner.
Right.
Like the good old days when we could leave our house and go
when
to
we
the
had to
store.
go grocery shopping, right? And we had to we could try on clothes and
yeah. I mean, I love working from home. I do love that, but because that's actually I gain an entire day just from 45 minutes an hour commute twice a day, 5 days a week. I gain a whole day. So,
well, you have so many fewer interruptions too. I mean, even if you have children at home, you're not interrupted as much as you are at work.
Yeah, no, I don't have children. I'm here with my grandmother, and she's still pretty self-sufficient. So, I just,
CPS isn't.
I get there's a lot of children that come just for Shalom.
I've been there, I know.
I get interruptions.
You don't go into the office at all?
Every now and then when I need to. I'm going Monday.
Melissa goes in.
Huh?
Melissa goes in a lot.
Yeah, I know. She's in a different position than I am, so I just go when I need to. So there's been a lot of stuff with, her being in charge of the building. She needs to be there for things.
Yeah.
I'm going Monday because of I have to go make copies of some DVDs. So certain things can't be done from home. So I can, and I have no problem, obviously, driving up to do that.
Do you know what? I've had the same tank of gas since the beginning of March. That has never, ever happened.
I hope there's no sludge.
I went through a long time.
It is what it is.
Yeah, it's, I think more the comedic point was what she was
pointing
out there.
No,
yeah, I mean, like whoever, exactly. I've filled up twice maybe since March because I've had to make trips here and there. And
me too.
I haven't had to fill up at all. And then on top of that, we've had to recharge the starter. I have a Prius, so it has the starter battery and then it has the battery cells that power the car. We've had to recharge completely the charger battery twice, the starter battery.
Oh, because it doesn't keep itself charged from being used?
because
Second
it's
Method,
been
which
sitting
one?
in my driveway.
Oh, see, I have no experience with like the Prius or anything of that
Well,
kind.
no, I mean, it's been sitting in my, any car would do that. It's
Yeah,
just
but
that,
you should take it out. Maybe Peter should take it to work someday.
no, I don't want Peter taking it to work
Why?
because it doesn't need that type of abuse and mileage, but he did take it to the shop.
No,
and
I
said-
mean, once in a while, just to,
No.
so you can take it on the freeway.
I'm
and just
hearing that
ride
the
around.
answer is no. I don't know about you,
No,
but I'm
plus he
reading.
doesn't like to
no.
drive it. I don't like him driving it and he doesn't like driving it. But he did take it into the shop and they said it had a good baby checkup, perfect health, they said. So
Very good. That's
Yeah.
exactly what you want to hear.
There's
yeah,
a,
someday I might need it again.
there's a recall.
No, there's not a recall on my car. They checked.
They checked.
Yeah.
Not every model has when recalls. I found that out with this car that I inherited from my grandmother. It's an Equinox, and I was seeing recalls, and then when I checked into it, it said, "Oh, only certain models." But I did check to see if mine was one, and mine wasn't. So.
Yeah, and also it depends on the VIN numbers. Even if you have the same
Right.
model, your VIN number may have been after they fixed it.
Exactly. Yeah, there's factors.
So they checked it. They ran the VIN number when he brought it in, or actually before he brought it in, so they know. Oh,
Great.
someday I'll need it again, I hope.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
funny because at the beginning of the year, oh, Peter, he just brought back home roses, beautiful roses.
Aw.
So,
Check
yeah.
the good column. Good boy, Peter. Oh, beautiful.
Brownie
He
points.
knows. He knows how to treat a lady. He knows
I
how to treat
guess.
the wife.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it worthwhile and driving me nuts, so.
Well, hey, at least he knows he's got to do a little something to, make
Yeah.
some good points in there.
Well, plus I'm getting ready for a challah baking class this afternoon. And so I'm in a rush because I want to do this, get everything prepped before I get on here. And I dropped an egg into the refrigerator. Just as he walked in, I said, honey, help.
Do you have a dog? Because
No.
I need to take care of it.
No, my cat will only eat her cat food.
Oh yeah, my cats. No, I can't get my cat to eat anything but cat food. My
Which is nice.
grandmother, one day I had gone, I think, into the office for a little while and came back, and my grandmother had set down a can of tuna, and the cat would not touch the tuna.
Wow.
So that's
Wow.
the extreme my cat goes through.
Yeah,
Nope, I will take kibble and that's it.
Same with Susie. There he is.
There he is, the man of the hour.
Kibble, no bits.
Tuna, kibble, no tuna. How dare you try to give me actual, real, delicious fish? I want this crunchy, whatever it is.
She begs while we eat, but then she just plays with anything you give her.
Oh, this cat is so sweet. My grandmother is not even really a cat person, but when I moved over here, I brought her because she's a real sweet cat, and she loves her now because she is a very sweet cat. And she gets in her lap, and so we're having a good old time over here.
Trying to get this set up. Sorry.
No, you
Hi,
got
Gail. Hi, Sarah.
I'm rather amazed you're here.
fresh.
Hi, Jeff.
Or Jeff.
Good morning, all.
Hi,
Hi.
Mark.
You guys
Hi,
have a great
Mark.
class. I'm gonna dip out. Y'all have a good
Okay.
one.
Did you give me
I
ownership
did.
here?
I did. You should have gotten a
Okay.
message, but maybe not. It shows your
Yep.
co-host here on my end.
Yep, got it.
All right.
Thank
Bye,
you.
y'all.
Good morning.
Bye.
Hello, everybody.
Good
Good to
morning.
be back in town.
Good morning.
Oh, yeah, I recognize that room.
Yes, indeed. It's long drive, I can say that.
What time did you get home?
About 1
Oh,
One in the afternoon, right?
morning.
What? 1 in the morning?
Yeah, I
Yes.
waited till Shabbat.
I thought you were.
and it's cooler.
How far is the drive, Mark?
About 17 hours.
Did you stop along the way or did you just try and
No,
drive that all?
no. I stayed for Shabbat in a hotel.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, I actually don't mind the drive.
So Fort Stockton to Houston is how many hours?
It was about 7.
7?
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that
Yeah.
way there are fewer people when you go to take a break around.
We have-
Yeah, I know, except for Shabbat, I normally would have driven from the morning, but we're good.
We have a
Good.
joke in our family that we're still waiting for our pizza in Fort Stockton.
Mhm.
I was about 14. We went there for we were driving through, I guess, to California or something. We stopped there overnight, and then we went and ordered a pizza, and it never came. And then they said, "Oh, we forgot to put it in." So we left, and so our joke is we're still waiting for the pizza.
I tell you,
Okay.
I thought Fort Stockton was like a city.
No.
Seeing the signs, Fort Stockton, and then when I got there, boy, was I surprised.
They have I drove past the Walmart, so I know they have that. All
Yeah,
right, I'm going to bring
Every
everybody
little
together.
town has a Walmart.
That's right. I'm going to bring you together here. We're going to get started. All right, we're looking at the Torah service today as we conclude the Shabbat materials, and next week we'll start with the high holidays. So the public reading of the Torah itself has its origins in ancient times. The Torah itself prescribes that once every 7 years, the Torah is to be read aloud to the entire community as a way of revering God and, most importantly, learning how to fulfill God's commandments. All right, so the Torah is supposed to be read every 7 years. That's what it prescribes. This public reading differentiates Judaism from most of the world's other religions who kept their most sacred texts available only to the religious elite. And that was true, by the way, of Christianity until really the last several hundred years. If you go back in history, you may or may, if you were in my history class at Melton, you may remember the plays that were done at Christmas and Easter time as a way of communicating to the world what the Bible would say to the common folk. So they didn't read the text. Instead, it was presented in play form. And so the local priests and ministers could certainly shape it how they wanted it. But nonetheless, for Jews, the text has been an available document from its earliest stages. And what's important to know is during the second period temple time, it became practice for people to gather on Shabbat and festivals to hear the Torah read and expounded. And they also gathered Monday and Thursday to get sort of a Vorspeise. At market days, they got a little bit of a flavor of it. What is interesting is that in its early days, in the very early days of synagogue life in the 100 years or 200 years prior to the Common Era, synagogue life, when they gathered, they did not pray. They read Torah. They got a sermon. They conducted business. But they didn't. Praying was added to the Torah reading later. Torah reading was the first of the forms. And it's been that way since really the days of the Maccabee. And the Talmud, at least, it credits Ezra, which is about 400 years before the Common Era, with the institution of the Torah reading. Okay. Now, whether or not that's true, we don't know. We tend to credit Ezra as well with the compiling of the Torah, the final form of the Torah that we have. We traditionally credit Ezra with that. So from there, from the once every 7 years, that's what the Torah prescribes. Two different traditions have developed from there. One in Eretz Yisrael and one in Babylonia. In Israel, the Torah was divided into 155 portions, which took 3 years to read. That's the triennial reading. That's what we do at Brit Shalom. That's what we do in many of the conservative synagogues today. In Babylonia, the Torah was divided into 54 portions, and the entire text was read each year. So again, the Torah says every 7 years, one reading. And two different traditions develop from there. Babylonia annually, and in Israel every 3 years. That's the source of an annual reading versus a triennial reading. We didn't make it up in modern times, okay? Let me do the following. I'm still figuring this out. I apologize. So let's go mute here. Got it. Okay. This way we don't have to hear all the buzzings. All right. All right. So what ultimately played out, as I've described many times when we added prayer to it, is sort of the dialogue. We talk to God through prayer. God talks to us back through traditionally through the reading of the Torah. And so that's the dialogue that is created. There's no denying the impact of reading Torah with the religious life of the Jewish people. It's in its centrality, its focus on education for adult Jews as well as children has had a powerful effect on the way we've become literate, the way we've been more educated historically because of this emphasis on the need to study text. And so its power, it was one of the, among all the things the rabbis came up with, this was one of the more brilliant ways of ideas they came up with. The Torah reading itself, when we read it on Shabbat morning, is a reenactment of the theophany at Sinai, of the giving of the Torah. Indeed, it's like a new giving of the Torah as we stand under a mountain that is burning with flames. The experience of revelation returns and is repeated every single time we take the Torah from the ark. And this is reflected by the fact that we have a minimum number of verses we can ever read when we take the Torah out, and that's 10. Okay, sort of like the 10 Commandments, 10 of a minyan. There is a communal nature to this, right? So on a Monday or Thursday morning, we can't read, it's not 333 aliyahs. 3 is the minimum for an aliyah, but it's 334. It can be more, but that's the minimum. And it's meant to be, this whole process is meant to be experiential, demanding that we actually see the Torah removed from the ark. Its procession to the reader's desk is like the original transmission of the Torah to the Israelites. We hear it as if it's being spoken to us by Moses. It's walked around in the community. I want to make a couple other points with this. It's widespread belief that since the temple's destruction, the temple was the way of communicating with God. One went to the temple. Whether or not God's presence was there more than any place else, we felt different, and so the communication was enhanced. Since the destruction, the Torah is the closest way we have. It's the ideas, it's the theoretical words of God. It's our closest device. There's no physical representation of God in Judaism, and so the Torah has taken on, in a sense, not in a physical way, but in a spiritual, conceptual way, that representation of God. And so we have the opening of the ark, the procession around the congregation, the reading of the text for the whole community, and those are moments when we sense that God's presence can be most clearly felt. We're creating moments, like we do with everything, a birthday. The end of the day, the birthday is really about the mom's service, and she gave birth. It's not really about the kid, but nonetheless, we create this aura around it. We create moments. The other thing about the marching around the community with the Torah, it's come to be seen as a royal procession, like a coronation. The Torah itself has a crown on it, oftentimes, in many communities. It's covered, it's dressed with the accoutrements of the high priest, the breastplate. So there's this sense of royalty that is implied in the service. It's got breastplates, it's got bells, it's got a crown. We're marching it out to the community, and people are reaching out towards it in the same way the king would walk amongst the community as his coronation was happening. Okay? With that in mind, let's look at the text. Rosalind, would you do us the honors of unmuting and reading there? None can compare.
None can compare to you, Adonai, and nothing compares to your creation. Your sovereignty is everlasting. Your dominion endures throughout all generations. Adonai reigns. Adonai has reigned. Adonai shall reign forever. May Adonai grant Israel strength. May Adonai bless the people with peace. Source of compassion, favor Sion with your goodness. Build the walls of Jerusalem, for in you alone do we put our trust, sovereign, exalted, eternal God.
All right, that's the opening paragraph of Ein Kamocha. When we open the Ark on Saturday morning, somebody tell me where the word Torah shows up.
Probably nowhere.
It doesn't. The opening paragraph of this ceremony, where we take the Torah out of the Ark, doesn't mention Torah. Instead, it says, Ein Kamocha, there is none like you, God, and none like your actions, Masecha. All right? It begins with a reference to God, not the Torah, and God remains the focus through this entire opening paragraph. The Torah isn't even mentioned until the second paragraph, and there it's only in the identification between God and Torah. And since the reading of the Torah, in a sense, is a reenactment of Sinai, it is appropriate to start by acknowledging the reign of God, whom we are encountering. Okay? This, in a sense, represents a theological preamble to Torah. We start with relationship. And this paragraph begins by asserting God's uniqueness in providing for all the world's people. Ein Kamocha, everybody, the whole world. All right, God ruled, God will rule, God rules, God did rule, and God will rule. And then it shifts from the universal to the particular. And it starts talking about the relationship of Jews. Adonai oz li'amo yiten. God gives strength to his people. Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom, and he blesses his people with peace. And so it goes from the universalistic God to God in relationship with Israel. All right, Adonai oz li'amo yiten. As I said, God blesses his people. This is a verse from Psalm 29. It moves the focus from God to Israel. All right. And it bridges God and the people of Israel, one of the important functions of Torah. Torah is the document that bridges us together. That's what we're starting with. We then have Tivnech Chomot Yerushalayim, build the walls of Jerusalem. Okay? So having noted the power of God, we pray that God use that power to initiate messianic times by rebuilding Jerusalem. All right? And so you've got this interweaving of Torah and Jerusalem. Torah and Israel, the land and the law, have historically been the two components of Jewish life. And we sing as we rise, as we open the ark, may those who hate you flee, so that Torah can come forth from Zion and God's word from Jerusalem. Messianic times. That's what it's talking about here. We begin with Sinai as the beginning, and Messianic times is the end of the relationship as we understand it now in our world. All right. And so that's what's being framed here, all before the introduction of Torah. Okay. Let's look at the second paragraph here. Let's see, someone hasn't written a while. Alan, you want to read the second paragraph? Whenever the ark. You need to unmute. Can't hear you. You don't have it? You don't have it? Just shake your head no.
No, I don't have it.
Okay.
I know what they are, so I don't copy them.
No problem. Okay. Jeff, you want to do the honors? Just unmute yourself. There you go.
Whenever the ark was carried forward, Moses would say, "Arise, Adonai, may your enemies be scattered. May your foes be put to flight. Torah shall come from Zion, the words of Adonai from Jerusalem. Praises God who gave the Torah to Israel in holiness."
Okay. So now at least we have the word Torah in here somewhere. Okay, it found its way. All right. So the ark is opened. The congregation rises, and as the Torah is removed from the ark, theoretically, two biblical verses are brought to the front. Vayehi b'msoah Aaron, when the ark is carried forward, Moses would say, And this is about the Israelites going to war. Israelites in the desert going forth in battle. And what would they do when they did so? They would take the ark with them, and then Moses would pray for victory. This verse depicts the ark as the seat of divine protection. Now, there's obviously a lot of mysticism here, a lot of ancient beliefs you can see in play from the ancient world. Most of us don't see the Torah as a trinket that we use when we go to war. Although, yeah, how many people do we know take a mezuzah and put it in their cars? All right? Yeah, we still have some of those remnants of those traditions that kind of weigh with us to protect us. And the mezuzah is sometimes referred to in some of the mystic circles as a protection of the house as well. So those ancient views still somewhat permeate our society, but I would say for the rationalists among us, it's more a historical look than a present day look. But the intent, again, is to create the special closeness between God and Israel. That's the intent behind it. And they believed in ancient times that the enemies who they were fighting would take one look at the ark, realize God is with the Israelites, and they'd flee. Warfare wouldn't be necessary. That's what Ibn Ezra says. Okay? Wouldn't even need to fight. They'd run away when they see the ark. The second verse, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, out of Zion goes forth Torah, is from Isaiah's prophecy regarding the Messianic age when Torah will go forth from Zion. By blessing God for having given us the Torah, we accept our responsibility to carry out its commands and to spread its message. Okay? So that's what we've got. So far we have this coronation of God. We have the Torah as a device of God. On the one hand, it serves in war to protect us, and it sends a message to our enemies. And it serves as an ultimate time in which Torah will go forth from Zion in Messianic time. We keep hearing that repeated concept throughout our prayers. There's hope for the future when things will get better. You can understand as the service develops over the last 2,000 years how that would be so poor a need. Okay? So you then have, since the middle of the 16th century, it's been customary here to add a personal benediction at this point. A prayer that we sometimes say, Be'ana Rachetzin. You know, we do it silently most of the time. Okay? Blessed is the name. It's written in Aramaic, which should tell you it's a personal prayer. All right? And it's found in the Zohar. So let's just take a look. I gave us the last 3 lines. Okay, I gave us the last 3 lines. So that this is what we sing, Be'ana Rachetz. All right. Ilana, would you unmute and read for us? In God.
In God do I put my trust. Unto God's holy, precious being do I utter praise. Open my heart to your Torah. Answer my prayers and the prayers of all your people Israel, for goodness, for life, and for peace. Amen.
Right. I also want you to note that it's in the singular. It really was a personal prayer. I picked up from my rabbi growing up that when I read this paragraph in English, I translated it into the plural. So I will read, in God do we put our trust. Do we utter praises, open our hearts, etc. But it really is a personal prayer, and it's one of the few places in the Siddur where you've got the word I instead of we. It's a significant difference. All right, we've now done all the prelims. We've coronated God. We've declared messianic times on the horizon. The Torah will come forth from Zion. All the good stuff will happen. We take the Torah out of the ark and we say, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, Adonai alone, Shema Yisrael. Echad Eloheinu, God is one, unique. Gadol Adonai, God is great. Kadosh Shemo, and his name is holy. Gadolul Adonai Iti, great is God with me. E.T. is not a cartoon character, it means with me. Uneromim Shemo Yachdav, and let us exalt God together as one. This is the climax of the Torah ceremony. We are taking Torah out of the ark. The cantor is holding the Torah scrolls. He faces the congregation and he chants these words. And once again, as he's chanting these words about Torah, it completely shifts back to God. There's no mention of Torah as he stands and holds the Torah. All right, so I want to emphasize that the rabbis were very concerned with turning the Torah into a god. And so even in the moments where we stand there with the Torah in our arms in front of the congregation, we're going to walk around and people are going to reach out to it. We're saying this is the connector, but God is the goal. All right. So earlier in our service, all three paragraphs of the Shema were recited. This line was chanted together. We sang Shema Yisrael together as a congregation. Here, it's recited antiphonally, meaning the congregation holds the Torah, he sings it, and then the congregation repeats it. This responsive face-to-face makes it dramatically decorative. There's a powerful ceremony going on here. And the community affirms the convictions of these words in so doing. We are reminding ourselves that God is standing before us and Torah is its placeholder, God's placeholder. Elliot Dorff teaches that it may be that the rabbis wanted to guarantee that we worship the God, this is what I've been saying all along, the source of Torah's authority rather than Torah itself. That is an important concept. We do not, what do you call it? Christianity turned the Messiah, Jesus, into God. Instead of being the Messiah as an access, they turned him into God. We did not, again, this is all happening at the same time in terms of the Judaism developing, the same time Christianity is developing, and we went a completely different direction. We did not turn Torah into God. All right, one more paragraph and we'll take a break and ask questions. All right, so let's see. Jeff, did you read yet? Go ahead. I don't remember.
Yeah, I read.
Okay, Joyce, would you read for us? Yours, Adonai. There you go.
Yours, Adonai, is the greatness, the power, and the splendor. Yours is the triumph and the majesty. For all in heaven and on earth is yours. Adonai is supreme sovereignty. Exalt Adonai, worship God who is holy. Exalt Adonai, our God, and bow toward God's holy mountain. Adonai, our God, is holy. Okay,
again, God, 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 God. Okay? Lecha Adonai, this first verse of this text is taken from Chronicles 29, okay? And it is a verse that is uttered by King David, part of his last speech to Israel when he told the people of the wealth and the materials that he was going to dedicate so that his son Solomon would be able to build the temple, the place of God, the place of connection with God, okay? So again, it's all the glory of God. Cantor takes the Torah, sings these lines, carries it around the congregation, always beginning on the right. They always talk about the right side of God. This is not a lefties world, I'm sorry. On the right, as he faces the congregation. As the Torah approaches, it's common for people to touch it with the fringes on their talis or with the siddur, and then to kiss the tzitzit or the siddur. All right. This procession with the Torah graphically symbolizes a number of convictions of Judaism. One is that the Torah belongs to the entire people, not the religious elite. That's being conveyed over and over. And through reaching out and touching it, we subscribe to it. We affirm its importance in our lives. Now, I'll tell you a story. I remember I was a teenager. And my rabbi asked me to daven. I was learning all the skills of davening. And so it was after my bar mitzvah. And I had the Torah and I walked around the community, the congregation with the ark, and I leaned in towards people. I got scarred. My rabbi took me to task for that. He said to me, Torah doesn't reach to people, people reach to Torah. Don't lean in to enable people to touch it. The people can reach in the direction, they don't have to touch it fully. They can reach in the direction and kiss their tzitzit. That has been, throughout this course, I've remembered different things that different rabbis have taught me over the years. That's one of the things I learned from my rabbi growing up. So let's see. Okay, here we go.
Rabbi,
Yeah, yes. Hold on. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I muted you. Unmute yourself again. Alan? Unmute yourself.
what about a child or someone sitting in a wheelchair?
All you need to do is take your tzitzit and reach in the direction. You don't actually have to touch the Torah. Just reach in the direction. If you're in the middle aisle, you should not be climbing over people to get to the Torah. Everyone can reach from their seat. If you're close enough, you can touch it. But you don't need to touch it. Reach in the direction is a way of affirming its value and its centrality to you. That was the message my rabbi gave me. Yes, Gail.
Yeah, to an outsider, someone that's not Jewish, perhaps attending a service, it almost appears that the Torah, the way we approach Torah is idolatrous.
Yeah, it looks like a deity.
It does.
Okay, so you can really understand why the words themselves communicate the exact opposite, because it can give that appearance of the Torah becoming godlike. And so almost everything, there's nothing here that says there's a holiness to the Torah anywhere in all the prayers we just said. It is God is holy, God is holy, God is holy. God gives Torah as a connector. And essentially what we have to remember is that we're reaching out to the ideas of God, not to the text, not to the Torah scroll. You've heard me say this many times on the Bima, it's a coronation. I go out of my way to communicate that so that nobody thinks that the Torah is a deity. That's an important message. Okay? All right. Yes, go ahead.
Just the words are holy. That's what's
The
holy.
words are holy because they contain God's ideas. That's right.
Hey, Mark,
Yes.
what's the difference between Sion and Jerusalem?
Sion actually is a mountain in Jerusalem. It's come to represent Jerusalem in the way that when you say the White House, you're referring to Washington. Okay? But Sion actually is a mountain in Jerusalem which has come to represent Jerusalem. In a symbolic way, it is Jerusalem. In a pragmatic, it's actually a mountain.
Okay.
The clock on my wall is off. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I've come back and I've just gotten back. I haven't had a chance to check all my clocks in the house yet. Thank you, Al. Very funny. All right. So we get
Mark, I'm just curious about this section in Aramaic. I mean, I don't understand why they stuck it in there in the middle.
I'm not 100% sure. I don't know what the historical context of it is. I could drosh on it, but we could all drosh on why it's there. But I have not found anything that suggests this is why it's here. I don't know. I don't know. There must have been something that happened historically that led to its inclusion.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I apologize for not having an answer.
That's okay. Thank you.
Cantor, what's your opinion about having the Torah count as the 10th person in the minyan, as sometimes is done?
Okay, so I would say here's my reflection on that. Now that we count women, I'm actually okay with it. In congregations that don't count women, I'm offended by it. Okay? That essentially, if you're going to say to me, the Torah is the equal of a person, don't tell me that a woman has less value. Okay? Look, it's a pragmatic way of enabling. It's what that really is. It isn't really a person. It's a way of saying, how do we go forward in the absence? How do we try and enable to the best of our ability for people to say Kaddish? You get close, we find a game. The rabbis did sort of engaged in a legal fiction. But if you're going to tell me the Torah counts, but a woman doesn't count, I'm not buying it. Okay, so that I buy the legal fiction provided. Okay, that's my answer to you. Is fair? All right. Originally, during Talmudic times, each person would get called to the Torah, would read a section of the Torah, and would say the blessings around that reading. So whoever did the reading said the blessings. Now, you know that's not the way it works today. In Yemenite communities and some Sephardic communities, that still is the pattern. But in our world, that's no longer the process. And it really resulted from the fact that people couldn't read Torah, and no one wanted to embarrass them for doing so, for not being able to do so. And so they would invite somebody up to do the blessings in addition to the person being called up to read the Torah. And that led to having a trained reader do the actual readings. Okay? One of the things I say to our kids, all right, we have a particular community where a lot of our people are reading Torah, and it's become more common, but 20 years ago, it wasn't very common. All right. And so I can tell you, I paid for a lot of my college by reading Torah as I went through college. I wouldn't go into a community and they'd give me $250 a week to read Torah. It's a much better job than $4 an hour or whatever. $2.35, I think, was the minimum wage at that point. That's that's 100 hours and plus at $2.35 an hour. Okay. So I tell the kids, you can earn some money. Learn this skill. It's very pragmatic, not to mention the holiness of it. All right. So since the Middle Ages as well, the Torah reading table was put on a raised platform known as a bima. And therefore, when you get called to the Torah, you are called going up. You're going up onto the raised platform, aliyah, la'alo, to go up. Aliyah is going up. All right? And so you go up to the raised platform, you say the blessings, and that's called an aliyah. The number of people who get called up for an aliyah reflects the sanctity of the day. Weekdays, 0, no Torah reading, except for Mondays and Thursdays, or a fast day, or Purim and Hanukkah, which are really post-Torah days. You have 3 people called to the Torah on those days. So it's more holy in a sense than the normal day. On Rosh Chodesh and Chol HaMoed, 4 people are called to the Torah, the next level of holiness. On Rosh Hashanah and the 3 festivals of Sukkot, Shavuot, Sukkot, it's 5. On Yom Kippur, it's 6. And on Shabbat, it's 7. So the rabbis designed a hierarchy of holiness by the number of aliyahs read: Monday and Wednesday 3, Rosh Chodesh Chol HaMoed 4, festivals Rosh Hashanah 5, Yom Kippur 6, Shabbat 7. Now with Yom Kippur and Shabbat, you always have this interplay. There are times in which Shabbat takes precedence. There are times in which Yom Kippur takes precedence. And so there's a little lack of clarity there. But nonetheless, you see the interplay between the 2 of them. Everything else is clear. There's a level of Kedusha.
Can I ask a question?
That'll be $1.
I thought Tuesday is holier than Monday and Thursday because God says twice.
So the rabbi, that's sort of a different minhag, and it depends on the rabbi you ask, because the rabbis declared Tuesday was a very good day to get married.
Right.
Because on
God
Tuesday,
said,
right, every other day of the week, God says that it was good, Vayar ki tov, and on Tuesday, he says it twice.
Right.
So it's a good day. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a holier day, but it's a good day. Obviously, so rabbis had different opinions, and they played with it. So they said, get married on Tuesday. God liked Tuesday.
Okay.
Yom Shlishi. Right? Yeah, you can play with this a lot.
Yeah. And
Now, again, Go ahead. Let me just finish that and then I'll take the next question. If you look at Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers, it's an entire game of which three are the most important. Rabbi this says these three. Rabbi this says these three. Rabbi this says these three. That's what it is. So you're right. There's another day that's special. Go ahead. What's your next comment?
And I thought that Yom Kippur is even holier than Shabbat. No?
It goes back and forth. It is referred to as Shabbat Shabbatot, the Sabbath of Sabbaths.
Yeah.
But in certain ways, there are times in which Shabbat takes priority, depending on how it plays. You hear that echo back and forth, and it depends, again, which rabbi you ask in which moment, because they could change their opinions too. But clearly, Shabbat and Yom Kippur are in a category above and beyond everything else.
Thank you.
That's how I'll answer that, okay?
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? All right. When you get called for an aliyah, you go to the Torah using the most direct route and as quickly as possible. That's why we gather people up by the ark in advance. There shouldn't be a delay. It's not a grand entrance. You rush up to Torah in anticipation of reaching Torah. Okay? The person who's honored with the aliyah touches the Torah with the tzitzit or the siddur, then kisses them and says the blessing. You may, if you've ever been on the bima when they've seen a bar mitzvah kid up there, you'll hear me say to them something I repeat over and over: touch, kiss, blessing. Touch, kiss, blessing. Touch, kiss, blessing. Because I've ritualized it for them so it's easier kind of just in their head. Touch, kiss, say the blessing. When saying these blessings, all right, Baruch Hu, you say the blessing, you do not look at the Torah. You are deliberately looking away so as not to give the impression that the blessing, which is a lower level of sanctity than the Torah itself, you don't want to give the impression that the blessing can be found in the Torah. That's why we created those giant boards with the blessings on the side. You look away from the Torah so that no one thinks that the blessings are to be found in the Torah. You also, this I learned from Joel Roth, again, I remember all the people I've learned different things from, is to be kept open. When you say the blessing before the Torah reading, you hold the two posts, but you keep the Torah open when you say the blessing before, so that the reader can begin immediately against the sense of rushing to get to Torah reading. No delays, rush up, rush, we want Torah reading. And so you hold it open, you look to the side so that no one thinks you're reading out of the text, and the reader can jump right in and rush right into Torah. There's a lot of symbolism here. Again, if you were to hold the Torah closed, will the world end? No, I promise you that. I've seen it happen many times, and I've never had the earth open up and swallow me. At least not yet. Yes, Gail.
Yes, so there are times, when, during the Torah reading and the blessing, where you close the Torah and cover it with, it.
All right, hold it. I'm still talking about the blessing before.
Oh, that's after.
Yes. After reading the Torah.
It's always confusing.
Right. But if you remember the concept, you want to rush into Torah, all right? So you open it. When you're finished, there's no rushing anymore. So you close it, all right, and you say the blessing. Now, the tradition says if there are going to be delays, you cover the Torah with the either the cover or the dot, what do you call it, the thing, the little fabric that we have. I apologize, I'm drawing a blank. All right. Now, my practice, and everybody does it differently. My practice is if all we're going to do is the regular routine, a regular Mishaberach and go on, I don't cover the Torah. If there's going to be an anniversary and all sorts of other kinds of delays, I do cover the Torah. So when it's in the routine of the norm, I don't. Some people do. All right. But if it's going to be something that is more delaying than that, we're going to sing, we're going to celebrate, we're going to announce things, then I do cover it. Okay. That's Levine. Has no more value than that. But that it's closed is clear from halakha. Okay? After concluding the Aliyah, you finish the brachot. There's a sense of returning to your seat slowly and deliberately, so to convey the message that you're not rushing away from Torah. And so what did the rabbis do? They created a way to make sure that that gets communicated. You stay there for an extra Aliyah. So if you have the first Aliyah, you stand on the side for the second Aliyah. You're not rushing away. Right? That's the whole point of why you stay there. So you're rushing to, and you're delaying the exit. There's a lot of symbolism here, and a lot of messages that are being communicated through behaviors. All right. I'll open the floor to questions at this point, and then we'll get into the blessings themselves. All right.
What
Michelle.
happens?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, what happens at the last Aliyah? Does that person also stay until after the Haftorah, or do they sit down?
No. Yeah. After the seventh Aliyah, you're lifting and tying the Torah. So at that point, it's being put aside in a sense, so they go down. Okay, Rosalind, I see you unmuted. Do you have a question?
Yeah, it's not a question, but when you were talking about, which days were more special, my grandfather died on Shabbat Shuvah, and I always thought that, and he was very religious, and that just made it more special.
That's very beautiful.
Yeah.
That's very beautiful. All right, let's see, Rosalind, as long as you're unmuted, why don't you read for us the blessing before the Torah reading? You think you have that? Yeah, you do. Torah, touch kids. I even wrote here, touch kids blessing.
After the reading, I'm sorry,
where it says, praise Adonai, the exalted one.
Praise Adonai, the exalted one. Praise be Adonai, the exalted one forever. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, who rules the universe, choosing us from among all peoples by giving us the Torah. Praised are you, Adonai, who gives the Torah.
Okay, so let me play with this a little bit. All right. So first of all, we start out with a Baruch Hu. Right? We call everybody together. Once again, the congregation responds to that with Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. And again, every time you say this, the person who's leading must repeat that line to indicate he's part of the community. So this is where we often see people not sure what to do. So let me make it clear. You say the first line, the congregation says the second line, and therefore you repeat it. All right, so if the question is, do I repeat it? Yes. All right. The sages derived this requirement to recite a blessing from the verse, when I proclaim the name of the Lord, that's the Torah reading, ascribe greatness to our God. That's the blessing. The verse in Deuteronomy towards the end. All right, and so the implication is public study of Torah requires a blessing. We do that with Hallel. We read a section of the Bible. We surround it with blessings. We do that with Pesukei de Zimra. We start with Baruch She'amar. We finish with Yishtabach, all the Psalms that are there. We surround text with blessing. Okay, so that's what's going on. That's the structure of it here. Now again, here we find ourselves with the traditional problem. Asher Bachar Banu, who has chosen us, Mikol Ha'amim, from amongst all the people. My suggestion with this is that you put a semicolon after those words, who has chosen us from amongst all the people, semicolon, v'natan lanu et Torato, and given us Torah. What have we been chosen for? Receiving Torah. The end of the day, without Torah, we are not chosen. Without the acceptance of Torah, anyone can opt into the acceptance of Torah, and anyone can opt out. Without the acceptance of Torah, nobody is chosen. And this blessing says, in my mind, says that Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, who has chosen us from amongst all the people and given us his Torah. That's A, B. Okay, I think that's very important. I also want to note the verb, the tenses of the verb. It switches. Asher bachar, who gave. V'natan lanu, and who, I'm sorry, Asher bachar, who chose. V'natan lanu, and who gave. Look at how the blessing ends. Baruch atah, notain. It's not natan. Natan is past tense, who gave. Notain is the same word. It's present tense, who gives Torah. We are reenacting. God gave it, and we are receiving it today. God is giving it again. We are reenacting the theophany at Sinai. All right?
The referencing, or we can say that God gives us the Torah every day because we can learn something new from the reading. So we get the Torah anew every day since we increase our knowledge.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so let me give you a couple rules that go with Torah reading. As I said to you before, the Torah should be opened only for a minimal period of time. And so we cover it. We roll it up and cover it whenever we can. If there's an interruption, as I said before, between aliyot, in any delays, we cover it with a mantle as well. The parchment of the Torah should not be touched directly, particularly the words. And so the reader uses the yad. This yad means hand. This pointer, in a sense, that looks like a hand at the end instead. And it does two things. One, it prevents you from touching the Torah directly. You have paper, when you look at paper, the ink has sunk into the paper. It's not sitting on top. Your oils of your hand will not cause the ink to run. Parchment, when you write on it, the letters sit atop the parchment. They don't fully sink in. And the result is the oils from your hands will cause damage to the letters. And as you know, if even one letter, if above is shortened, it becomes a yud, then you cannot read the Torah until it's corrected. All right? So we don't touch the Torah. The other thing, I love this. This is the most pragmatic. I just came across this recently. The use of the yad also prevents any obstructions of view from the person honored with the aliyah. So, you know, this thin little yad, as opposed to your arm reaching out, you're letting them see and read along. I love that. I don't know that the rabbis thought that, but I love it as a new interpretation. Finally, nothing inappropriate may be said in front of the Torah. I had a guy who used, one of the Gabayim in one of my previous congregations, who loved to tell me dirty jokes. And I had to reach a point where I'm reading Torah and I had to say to him, please stop. You want to tell me that I'm not a prude? You want to tell me the joke? Tell me later. Not while the Torah is sitting here.
Right.
Okay.
Respect.
Right. I love a good joke like anybody else. Let's talk about time and place. It's one of the first things we teach children. Time and place is everything. All right. The last rule is anytime the Torah moves, there should be a second person moving with it. I suspect this was a pragmatic outcome in that the person holding the Torah could not defend himself or the Torah. And so when the Torah marches around the congregation, there must always be a second person following. All right. In our congregation, since a lot of the times the person holding the Torah and marching is not the person davening, which is unique to Brit Shalom. I had not seen that before. Okay. But nonetheless, we achieve that goal through doing that. The person davening is the second person. Okay. If I'm davening, you'll see the rabbi marches around. All right. We make sure that someone is going, that it's not unaccompanied. Couple more things. All right. Hagbah. This is a dramatic custom that goes back to the 7th century. We take the Torah, we open it wide, and we hold it up, the Torah script, to be seen by the entire congregation. That's the point of the ritual, so that everybody can see the words. And it has somewhat of a biblical precedent. The Bible tells us in Nehemiah, and Ezra opened the book in the sight of all the people. Rabbis see a verse like that, and they create a tradition from it. That's what that is. Yeah, I'm sure that isn't what Ezra meant directly, but it was a way of making it public, a way of making it owned. We reach out to Torah as it marches around. We touch and kiss it when we come up for an aliyah. We look at the word as it's held up by the Hagba. Okay? So you have all these ceremonies, and it's meant to be, you know, when you have a president, or a king installed, or you know, a coronation. There's a lot of ceremonies with that. Royal weddings. My mom couldn't wait. When Prince Diana and Charles got married, my mom sat up all night to watch all the pomp and ceremony. We love that stuff. An inauguration. We love that stuff. Okay? That's what's going on here. It's a way of involving people and making the moment special, and a recreation of Sinai. I do want to talk a little bit about the Maftir and then the Haftarah, and we'll call it quits there. The only aliyah that's different is the Maftir. Maftir means, is the same root of the word as Haftarah. Haftarah and Maftir are the same. They have nothing to do with the word Torah. Torah means teachings. They're not even, the T letter that's used in both of them is different. Torah is a Tav. Maftir and Haftarah are a Tet. Okay? They mean concluder. Maftir concludes the Torah reading. Haftarah concludes the biblical readings, because we read a section from the prophets. Okay? That's what's going on. So they're a concluder. It is not counted. You'll notice I said 7 aliyahs. It's not counted among the official number of aliyahs, and it actually is a repeat. It is a repeat. It needs to repeat a section that was already read, with the exception of Yontif when we read something different, a completely different section of the Torah. But normally it is a repeat. To make that point clear that it's a repeat, the rabbi said, unlike other aliyot, a child under the age of bar bat mitzvah can be called to the aliyah, can be called to read the maftir. They cannot read the others. The maftir they can read because it's already been read. All right? Hold on one second. Okay, got it. All right. So then now we finish up the Torah and we turn to a section of the prophets, the Haftarah, again, concluder. The prophets, this reading from the section of the prophets was introduced during the time of Antiochus, of Hanukkah fame. Okay? In his attempt to assimilate the Jews, he outlawed a whole number of Jewish distinctive practices, including the public reading of Torah, because that's all that was read from the Bible at the time. So what the people did, and what the rabbis did at that point, they really weren't rabbis, they were maybe sages at the time, all right, is they took a section from the prophets that had a thematic connection to what would have been read had they been allowed to read Torah. Okay, so if we were going to read about the creation story, they'll find a section in the prophets that somehow references the creation, and it was a way of reading it in the absence of the actual reading. This is what you should remember we were going to read. This historical reality, also, by the way, there is again, we play with this hierarchy of holiness. The Torah is at the top of that hierarchy. The prophets are a lower level. All right, but if you want to see, again, Haftarah is introduced at a time of suffering. Okay, we're not allowed to read Torah, war, etc. Torah reading is chanted in a major key. Haftarah is chanted in a minor key. It's meant to reflect the fact that this was a sad time. The addition of the Haftarah is a sad statement. All right? When the ban ultimately was lifted, God forbid, once we add something to a service, God forbid we should ever take anything away. And so now we do both. Right? It's one of the reasons why when Rabbi Teller will say, you know, let's do the Sephardic read, this is a shorter version of the Haftarah, it is because he recognizes it's really an addendum. we're reading the Torah and then we're repeating something that has something that references what the Torah would have said when we actually are reading the Torah. And so he's willing to do the shorter version. Let's not lengthen the service. That's the logic behind his what he does. And to go one step further, in order to not let it seem that the Haftarah had equal standing with the Torah, the sages decreed that the person who reads the Haftarah must first read a section of the Torah, the Maftir. That's why the person who gets the Haftarah gets the blessings before. It's a way of, you can't, if I invite 7 people up for an Aliyah, and then I choose Alana, I'm going to pick on you, and I choose Alana for the Maftir, she just got the lower level sanctity, for the Haftarah rather. She got the worst Aliyah in the group. And so what I do is I give her a reading from Torah, and they created the Maftir to connect Torah to Haftarah. Last couple of points here, and then I apologize. I've got an unveiling I've got to go to today. Originally, there were no set Haftarot. The person who came up and chanted the Maftir would choose an appropriate section from the prophets, and he'd read that. Over time, however, certain choices became established, and you no longer do that. The Rabbi Moshe Feinstein ruled that you can't do that anymore, that there's an accepted custom of what should be read, and so that's what we do. All right. I think that's where I'm going to finish for today, other than the Gabayim. All right, last thing, Gabayim. According to the Talmud, there should always be 3 people around the Torah on the bima when there's a Torah being held. We do that. It's a court, just like on Kol Nidre, or when we pull the Torah up for blessing of the new month. 3 people at all times. Okay, the Torah. There's no intermediary. We want people to see the Torah is the centerpiece here. But the Gabayim have definite responsibilities. Let me tell you what the role traditionally of the Gabayim is not. It is not to call the people up for an Aliyah. That's not the role of the Gabbai. It can be, but that's not traditionally the role. I got to my first synagogue, and Rabbi Simon Potak, Chaim Potak's brother, said to me, "You're the cantor. There are 2 Gabayim. You call the people up. You're the cantor. You call them up." All right? So I would do V'yazor v'yagim v'yoshia. All right, and that was the case. The role of the Gabayim, the 2 people on the sides, is to stand there and make sure that the Torah is read exactly. The Torah reader does not have vowels. The Torah reader does not have trope. It is the role of both Gabayim to be able to correct the reader, to be so fluent in Hebrew that they will correct. Not only, by the way, but you're not allowed to correct something that doesn't change the meaning of the text. So you have to understand the reading, not just be able to read it. All right? The Gabayim cannot correct something that doesn't change its meaning. Only something that does. So who and he, if that happens, all right, because in the Bible, who and he, it, or it's interchangeable. The genders are interchangeable in the Torah in a way they're not in modern Hebrew. Okay? You don't correct that. So the role of the Gabayim technically is to make sure that the blessings are, that the Torah is read exactly as it should be. And I learned in my congregation, Ramah, when I went to Ramah, I was at Camp Ramah in New York, in Nyack, with 60% of the staff were yeshiva bachers. All right, they were modern Orthodox Jews. And if anybody made a mistake, the entire congregation yelled out the correction. Boy, did I learn to be accurate. That'll do it. All right? And so I learned to perfect my Torah reading because you don't want to be embarrassed. But their role, I've heard some people say, it's not nice, you shouldn't correct them. Wrong. That's the whole point. The Torah is the ultimate respect here. All right? So you do correct them. Now, in some congregations, it's become customary for the people to do the calling up as well. And that's an additional responsibility. But that's not what the Gabbai Rishon is primarily charged with. It is about correcting the Torah reader. If he happens to do that as well, great. That's not his primary role. I'll take just a couple questions at this point. Hold on, let me unmute everybody. All right, I'll take a couple questions, and then unfortunately I do need to run. I want to remind you of a couple things. One, first of all, Gail, I know your birthday is coming up. A happy birthday. I know there are other things going on in your life, but I didn't want to miss that. The other thing is that next week we start with the high holidays. I'm going to try and get the same codes and everything else, so please join us for that. All right. Anybody else with a question?
What happens if you drop the Torah? I've heard different things.
Yeah, well, all right. So, all right. So the answer to that theoretically is that everybody present fasts for 40 days.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Right. So we know that's not going to work. Okay. Otherwise, what you've got is a dead congregation, and that's not helpful in the least. All right. And so what the rabbis did, that's what it states literally. The rabbis did, they pulled a Muslim on this. One way out of it is to say, yeah, you fast 40 days, but you eat at night, you eat as little as you can to survive, but you eat. The other is to give tzedakah. But it isn't say, I'm going to give $18 at tzedakah. This is the equivalent of I'm going to suffer for 40 days, you give tzedakah. It's got to be painful. Okay? All right. But really, it's all playing around with the fact that 40 days is not going to work.
No.
Anybody else? All right, well, I thank you for the journey. As I said, we've gotten through the Torah service. Next week, we're going to do Barosh Hashanah. We'll deal with Unatana Tokef. The week after with Kol Nidre. After that, we will look at Ashamnu and Al-Chet, the prayers of confession. And the fourth week is a brand new lesson I wrote this year on Mila. All right. So that's our goal for the 4 weeks leading up to Rosh Hashanah. I'll be teaching it on a Sunday morning, but I'll also be teaching it during the week. So the information will come up. So if you can't make one, I'll teach the same lesson twice.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful week.
Thank you
very much.
Everybody.
Welcome
Thank you,
back.
Elise, again for all you've been doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.